much. And thank you, Fish, for doing the speaker series. I think the Boy Scouts were fantastic. Thank you. You're going to see them again later in some of these slides. I've worked with them in the past, and they're a great group of young leaders, and it's always so cool to watch the next generation of young leaders be born. There's another acronym that you probably, it's not really an acronym, that is important to learn, and it's called AMBUSH, which is how I got here tonight, because I was down here about 3 weeks ago meeting with Paul and his group on a whole separate issue. And he got me to tell a story, which I'm going to share with you here in a moment. And afterwards he said, hey, that's a fish story. Will you come speak? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to do that. And so I'm driving home and I call Chris. And I said, hey, Chris, you're not going to believe this. I got asked to speak. I think you did that, right? He said, yeah, I helped put him up to it. I'm like, oh, I was ambushed. Okay. So I do want to thank you guys all coming. One other thing I do know is time is valuable for everybody. And you came out on a Thursday night to hear my stories. My wife was amazed when I went home and told her I was coming here. And she's like, a group of people are going to come and listen to you tell stories? I said, yeah. And they're excited about it. She's, maybe I should call them. I have to hear them all the time. And I want to thank the folks who are on YouTube who are dialing in. Word spread. And so the pressure is on. I got family and friends from who knows where at this point that are dialing in. And because it's the internet, and it's being recorded, that means it's forever. So whatever I say to you, I'm going to hear about 10 to 15 years from now at a family reunion. Remember that time, Brad, where you stood up on that stage in front of all those folks? And then finally, I do want to thank my wife and my mother-in-law for being here. It's always great to have family with you and friends who are in the audience. And so I just want to do a shout out, and then for the folks who are dialing in. A couple things, a couple trends that you'll see through this brief. And I didn't just want to come tell a bunch of stories. I felt like there had to be a reason or a purpose. So I'm going to share a few things that I've learned. And these stories probably won't be utterly remarkable to some of you, but I do want to share them through how I learned them and how I felt them. And so as I get done with each story, I'm going to tell you why I told you the story and what I think the point is. And you can decide whether you agree with me or not. I am going to start, my uncle, who I believe is dialed in, retired as a CW5 warrant officer in the Army, Chief Warrant Officer 5 in the Army. Took very good care of me when I was a young man coming up through the ranks, when I was in ROTC, and then as a young lieutenant. And he shared two pieces of advice that I'm going to try to do today. The first one is called the 3 B's. Has anybody heard that? Okay. Be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. I'll work on the first 2. The middle 2 is going to have to be up to you, and you have to decide whether there was, in fact, brilliance up here or not. The other one, and this one was particularly important for young Lieutenant Hilton, and was another theme that you'll see through these stories, which is called BYT squared. And it stands for bite your tongue and bide your time. You know, they always say, hey, Lieutenant, you know, we all know you don't know what you're talking about, but when you open your mouth, you just remove all doubt, right? And so that kept me out of quite a bit of trouble, because the 3 most important lines that I had when I first started in the military was, yes, sir, no, sir. It'll never happen again, sir. No, I don't know what I was thinking either. So with that, I don't know. Oh, I got the slide clicker. I was going to go through and kind of give you a quick brief on like a snapshot of my military experience, but I think Paul already covered just about 90% of it. So I'll just point out that that's me in 1986 as PV1 Hilton. I went to basic training in Fort Dix. Spent 6 years in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. My uncle, who I mentioned earlier, said, hey, Brad, do you want this do you want to be a hobby? You want to go do this full time? And I did. So I went to ROTC and commissioned, and that's me in 2019. What you can't tell is how much hair I really lost, which is why I picked that picture. But apparently I stayed fairly serious the entire time, which is amazing. But first assignment of AOBC, or the Aviation Officer Basic Course, was to Germany. While that was in the early 90s. While I was there, I met my lovely wife. She's here, and then I had to put one when I first met her. And then this is young Lieutenant Hilton, the aviator. That's actually me getting ready to go to Bosnia. So I was there for 2 years, and My first deployment as a now first lieutenant was to Bosnia in 1995. I was in the 1st Armored Division and was with the first wave. And we went down to Kaposvar, Hungary, and we staged out of there because they were working on a bridge over the Sava River. And we were waiting for that to complete, so the logistics, when we flew into Tuzla. Well, on December 29th, in the middle of the night, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I don't know if you can read this or not, but I'll kind of give you a snapshot. The Sava River, which divided Croatia and Bosnia, swelled. It was like one of those 100-year kind of swells. Went up about 15 feet, you'll see, above ground level almost instantly due to ice melt. Well, there was a bunch of engineers there, and they had a tent city, which you can see here, and it was flooded in a matter of minutes. And you, down here, I don't know if you can read it, they talked about how USRA is the command, the main military command in Europe, and they could hear these guys screaming on the radio as all their stuff was being washed away. So what does that have to do with Lieutenant Hilton? So about 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm in, my boss comes and wakes me up and he says, the battalion commander wants to see you. He wants to see everybody in the ops center right away. And so everybody assembled, they tell us what's going on down there, and they said, these guys are wet, they're cold, everything is gone, we don't know if they're gonna make the night. Weather is bad, there is no navigational aids that are available, and this is a high-risk mission, and we're not going to direct any or order anybody to do it. We're only gonna take volunteers, but we need people to fly supplies down to these. And as I'm standing in the room, they said, do we have any volunteers? And I watched every hand go up instantaneously, and it really floored me. Now, I flew a little scout helicopter, doesn't carry a whole lot of cargo, and I have no navigational aids. And so I backfilled a Black Hawk pilot in our operations center that evening as those guys did turn after turn after turn all night long, give these guys the supplies. And then in the morning, they had the things they need. We didn't lose a single soldier that night, which was amazing. And what I learned from this, watching this thing unfold, was that you know, you do what you say, right? One thing when you say it, you mean it. And we say we never leave anybody behind. And I was amazed to observe a group of men and women to risk their life for a group of people they didn't know. And I thought that was pretty amazing. Thank you. Okay, let's flash forward here a little bit on a little bit of a lighter note. So now it's springtime, right? And so this is us it's me on the airfield at Tuzla, and the Nord Pole Brigade, there's an acronym for you, which is a peacekeeping brigade that was from Poland and the Scandinavian countries. And they were doing we were doing a lot of missions with them because Bosnia had a lot of mines, and so they were really looking for like mass grave sites and so forth. But it's a lot safer to fly than it is to walk or drive, and so we were doing these turns over right after the other. And so after about 4 to 6 weeks, the one-star Danish, I believe he was, Danish one-star comes and sees me and my crews and says, hey, it's been a few weeks, we kind of want to know how's it working, and is there anything we can do to make these operations go better? And so my battle buddy and co-pilot, who is right here, Brian McCrary, says, we're flying 2 missions a day, right? He said, yeah. Do you care when we fly them? No, not at all. Would you mind if we flew 1 in the morning, break for lunch, fly 1 in the afternoon? No, not at all. We'll be happy to. So for the next 4 to 6 weeks, that's what we did. Now, the U.S. Army, we had meals ready to eat, or MREs, and what they call T-RATs. And let me tell you, if you've eaten at a mess hall or food area at a high school, college, you know how good the food is, right? It was really lousy. Well, the Europeans were really smart. They flew chefs in. And so this was a particularly brilliant move, right? Because we're eating very well-prepared meals 1 day a week while everybody else is back at the U.S. base eating MREs. Being quiet. It's about 6 weeks later, having Is it a dead spot? All right, I'll stand up here. Thank you. So it's 4 to 6 weeks later, and I find out that the battalion commander wants to see me. And so I go up there, and apparently the battalion commander and the brigade commander had flown out to the Nord Pole Brigade because we had been doing all these missions with them. And they wanted to see how it was going until the Danish brigade said, oh, it's going fantastic. We set those missions up so that your guys can eat lunch every day, just like Lieutenant Hilton asked. So I went to his office, and he said, well, first of all, I'm going to give you a plus up for ingenuity. And the second thing is, come into my office because I'm about to chew your backside. And it goes back to those three most important things, which was, yes, sir, no, sir. It won't happen again, sir. I don't know what I was thinking either, sir. But I will tell you one thing we did learn is it's a lot easier to get your butt chewed with a full stomach, especially when it's done from a chef who was flown in from Europe. All right, so I'm going to jump forward about 10 years, and I'm going to jump forward about 10 years. It's 2004, and I'm deployed to Iraq. And so I had changed in between this time from flying helicopters, and this is when I got into IT, because I mentioned I was a CIO early. And so what kind of happened there is I'm coming out of those tours into Bosnia, and my wife and I had also just come out of company command. So we had young kids, high rate of deployment, and I said, hey, what's next? Aviation assignment officer, and they're going, you're going to Louisiana to be a recruiter. New Orleans? No, it wasn't New Orleans. I go, okay, I get it. You got to go where the Army tells you to go, but what about my wife and my family? I've been deployed a lot. I just kind of want to be with them and so forth, and she's in the military. And the assignment officer said, not my problem. So I'm like, okay, well, I had this thing called a functional area, which I got IT, information technology. I had one computer class in college, and so I'm like, well, I don't know anything about this thing, but I don't want to go to Louisiana, and I certainly don't want to be away from my family, so I'll give him a call. And so the guy on the phone says, hey, how would you like to go to grad school on us? And I'm like, I'd love to go to grad school. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about, computers. He goes, we'll take care of that. And I said, okay, well, that sounds really cool, but, it's been a high deployment and all this. I want to be with my family. He's like, guy, we have computers everywhere in the Army. I promise you I will keep you with your family. So off I go. And so I went into that world, and I found out I had a knack for it. And so that's what I did for the last, almost 18 years of my military service. And so we're transitioning now from where Brad was a pilot to him doing those other IT things. So I find myself in, so I'm an IT guy now, right? And I'm wearing aviator wings, and I'm an IT guy, and I get deployed because we're trying to build some collaborative systems, and this is all the pre-Facebook. That's right, ladies. There was once a time when Facebook did not exist, but this was that time. So I'm there, right, and so I was supposed to go in bed with the Aviation Brigade because I looked like them, and I thought it'd be great to grab lessons learned and so forth and so on. Well, it didn't work, so they moved me over to the 39th Infantry Brigade. I am now embedded with an infantry brigade. And I find myself with a company commander who we will call Lieutenant Wilson, first lieutenant out of the Arkansas National Guard, and they are in a really crappy part of Baghdad where Sadr, if you ever heard that name, it was his home turf. And so it was a particularly rough neighborhood. And so we get a report, an intel report, that a small U.S. base beside a power plant is going to be attacked with the goal of overrunning it in the morning by Sadr and his forces. We happened to be on a small U.S. base right beside a power plant, so it didn't take a whole lot of dots to connect to figure out what was going on. So I'm hanging out with Lieutenant Wilson. I'm a major at this time, so I'm wearing the gold oak leaf. And so I'm hanging out with them, and we're stacking sandbags and getting those MRE boxes ready to go. And this is in about 10 so at night. And we're expecting attack first thing in the morning. And then about 2 a.m., the commander says, we're not going to wait. We're going to send out some patrols, and we're going to go see if we can draw the enemy to a fight now and disrupt their attack. All right. So we're out on patrol, and we're going through a lot of small towns. And we're at one point, we're in an up-armored Humvee, and the men get out. And it's just me and Lieutenant Wilson, and it's quiet, and we're waiting for them to come back. And he looks at me and he says, hey, sir, if you got a second, I got something I want to get off my chest. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. What is going to happen here? I didn't know what to expect. So he looks at me and he says, well, we have a policy that key leaders are not allowed to poke their head out of the turret of the Humvee because snipers are shooting at them, and so we're not allowed to do that. Well, a couple weeks ago, we were out on patrol, and my men were out doing stuff, and I couldn't see, and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I popped up, and a sniper shot, and it hit the forearm of my M4, and it shattered into a million pieces. Was that wrong? Like, what? Was that wrong? Well, it doesn't sound immoral, unethical, or illegal to me. You were trying to take care of your men, right? Yeah, I just couldn't see. I think you're okay. Okay, all right. So I get done with this, and I'm like, that's what you're worried about? We're worried about getting attacked in the morning, and we're out on patrol in the middle of some really hostile, and that's what's on your mind? It would get rough. We would actually lose a couple people in about 2 hours later. Unfortunately, the attack never came. But the lesson I learned from that, or I took away from that, is as a leader, you are what you need to be for them, not for you. Me, I wanted to be the next Patton, right? But what he needed was a senior officer who was not in his chain of command to get what was important off his chest. I didn't think it was a big deal. He did. The important thing as a leader is to be there for them. That was the lesson I learned, like, okay, I get that. I get that. I did not know that. So let me flash forward again about another decade. So I find myself back in Baghdad. This is so I was there in the very beginning, did a whole bunch of things, and then kind of got to go back at the end. And so now this is at the Operation New Dawn, which concluded in 2011, and that was the end. As Paul said, there's a lot of operations, right? That was the end of the U.S. Occupation of Iraq. On 1 January 2012, they were a full sovereign country, which they are today. So all the U.S. combat forces had to leave, and they left about 200 U.S. service members behind. I was one of those 200, and I'll tell you, it was something to watch 30,000 of your closest friends leave in a country you have just been fighting at for over a decade, and you're there with 200 of your closest buddies, right? And so it was a little bit auspicious, if you will. But as you can see from the pictures, our goal was training the Iraqi forces and military sales. We had left them a lot of equipment. We had trained our army, and so our goal was to continue doing that stuff. My job, because of that lessons learned experience in the Army, was to be about 2 or 3 lieutenant colonels were there. We were going to build the training and doctrine command for the Iraqi Army, much like we have here. And so my job was to advise General Munir, who was the 1-star in charge of the Iraqi Lessons Learned Center. And again, I had buddies doing like their version of the War College and so forth. So one morning, I would go out and see him pretty regularly. And after the U.S. forces left, I'll put, like, why is he wearing a suit? Is about February, everybody left in January. He looks at me and he says, hey, Brad, you need to stop coming in uniform or you're going to get us both killed. Sadr has embedded an officer in my organization and he's watching you. Can you come in a suit? Okay, and there's me getting ready to go out on patrol in a suit. I'll have to say, when I entered as a lieutenant, I never expected to ever do that, which was an interesting experience. But anyway, General Munir calls me. It's Sunday morning, and he says, Brad, I need you to come see me. And, we're living in Iraq. It's a Muslim country, and their religious day is Friday. So we left them alone on Friday, and they did their things, and the embassy and everybody else, that was their rhythm. My boss said, nope, Sunday is the day that we celebrate Christianity, so we're going to take Sunday, but we'll be respectful on Friday, so we'll stay on the base and do our thing. But Sunday unless it's an emergency, we're going to take Sunday. So he calls me Sunday morning, and I said, not coming. Is it an emergency? No, I'll see you tomorrow morning. I'll be there bright and early. So what do you mean you're not coming? Now, I was taking a little bit of a risk here because people weren't telling them no. And so I said, no, this is my day off. I am going to do what I do on Sunday, and I'll be there tomorrow. He told me it was an emergency. So Monday rolls around, I show up, I walk in, and he's like, you didn't come. No American soldier has ever told me no and wouldn't come. I said, I don't bother you on Friday, right? He said, no. I said, then don't bother me on Sunday unless it's an emergency. I respect your beliefs, you respect mine. And so we had this rough relationship the whole time until that moment. And then all of a sudden he said, okay, I get it. And then we had a lot of respect and a lot of trust for one another after that. and we got a lot of mileage done. As a matter of fact, about 4 months later, he asked me to go down and visit Qasr. These are pictures of the Iraqi Navy, by the way. How many Navy guys? Yeah, so this is the Iraqi Navy. You can see the little sign here that says Iraqi Navy. But he asked me to go down there and told me, he said, you'll be safe. On my honor, you'll be safe. And so what do you do after you have those experiences? Well, yeah, I did. I'll go out of the base. That's my security, which is a Navy commander. Him and I went out there by ourselves, and we didn't have any escorts or any security. But based on the trust that we had, I felt confident in doing so. And the moral of that particular story is no matter what, hold on to your values and beliefs, and they'll see you through, right? And we actually made a lot of progress, built a lot of trust, and made a lot of headway by both of us holding on to our beliefs. All right, so let me hop forward here a little bit. Okay, so now I'm a colonel, right? Now I'm supposed to be wise. Those 3 things, yes, sir, no, sir, won't happen again. So that actually kind of went on, but now there was just less people to yell at me as kind of went up through the ranks. But what you see here is in Korea, at the U.S. Forces Korea headquarters, which is the main headquarters on the peninsula. It actually is a combined forces command with us and the Koreans, the United Nations Command, and the U.S. Forces Command for all the services are in this one building. They call it the White House. But there's 3 tables that they signed the 1953 armistice on. This right here is one of those tables. We got one, the Koreans had one over in their military, and the North Koreans have one. And so the reason I'm showing you this is behind here are all the flags of all the U.S. and Korean forces that are on the peninsula. And what we would do when visitors come, we would put a guest book about right here, and they would come up and they'd sign it and they'd get your picture taken just like this, right? And it was, visitors loved it. It was a really, really great thing to do, and everyone had a good time with it. Well, my job there was to run those events. That's why I knew all this. And so whenever there were visitors, and there was a honor guard company that also defended and guarded that headquarters. Well, they worked for me. And so I'm doing my pre-walkthrough, and I'm looking, and I stop, and I go, I need to get those flags cleaned. And so, the sergeant was like, okay. And so we went on, and I come back about 30 minutes later doing my pre-walk, and here are 3 soldiers tearing down all these flags. And I go, what are you guys doing? So we got a VIP visitor coming from the United States. They're going to be here in like an hour. He looked at me and he said, sir, there's some colonel who said we had to get these flags cleaned right away. So I stopped and I said, Sergeant, I want you to know that colonel is an idiot. Put them all back, and we'll get them cleaned later when we don't have any visitors. And I went down, looked in the mirror, and said, yes, sir, no, sir, it won't happen again, sir. But the moral of that story is, and it applies to all of us, is be careful what you say, because most likely someone is actually listening to you. And I'll go through this next one. Is about a year later when I saw what all this looks like in real time. In 2015, the summer, in August 20th is when this event occurred. But there is an annual exercise called UFG, Ultra Freedom Guardian, I think it is. And it's a big one that happens with the U.S. and Korea, and people come over, forces come over from the United States. It's a big event. And so we're in the middle of this, and there had been an incident in the DMZ where a couple of young Koreans lost their legs because there were some mines in areas where South Koreans patrolled, and the tensions just spiked. And so now it's August 20th, it's in this region, and the North Koreans and the South Koreans exchange artillery fire over the DMZ at one another. We're in the middle of an exercise, and I'm telling you what, it really spiked. And they kind of catch that doesn't happen very often because the risk of an all-out war that nobody wins. I mean, everybody recognizes this. But they're like 2 bullies on a playground that just started poking each other and didn't know how to stop. And so we actually divided the staff, and part of it is preparing for a real war. My wife is on the DMZ with the demilitarized zone with 8th Army, so she's like 3 miles from where the game would start. And we have half doing the exercises, like we can't show them that we can't do it, and we have half planning for a real world war. And so my boss, the commander, is flying back and forth to DC over and over again, and the staff is hurting. So the Chief of Staff and 8th Army Commander was a gentleman, a great, phenomenal leader named General Champeau. Does anybody know him? Well, he's pretty tough. And so we gave him a gift of a wire brush, you know, because we said he'd wire brush the staff, which was us, because he was that tough. Well, in this moment, while we're all under an immense amount of stress, I'm starting, and I worked very close with him. I got scar tissues in the backside from the wire brush. I see him kind of transform, and he starts becoming a coach and a mentor. Hey, we're going to be okay. It's going to be all right. The commander's got this. Do what you have to do, take care of your people, give the commander what he needs, and we'll get through this. And so we do. After about 2 weeks, the whole thing settles down, and I remember being in the command post bunker, and we're sitting around, the whole senior staff's there, and the commander's looking at all of us and going, hey guys, good job, way to go, we got through this, good teamwork, and so forth. And I see the same guy, and his whole facial expressions change, and when the commander gets done telling us how good of a job, he looks at us and goes, all right, guys, you've been slacking off. Let's tighten this up. You know, you need to get that done. I let you go for 3, now get it done. And I looked at that and I said, this is a brilliant leader in action. This goes back to that other lesson I learned. He's what we need, not what he needs, not what his ego needs, not what it's what did we need. And I thought, I will follow somebody like that anywhere, anytime, wherever they go, because that's what, you know, a really good leader is. He's what everybody else needs, not what they need. I think that's where the expression servant leadership comes from. By the way. Okay, so I'm going to jump, and this is the story that got me here. This is the real reason I came here tonight was not that. That was just the quick warm up. I only have 2 left. I want to talk about transitioning out of the Army, because I retired in February of 2019, and I had a very, very hard transition. I did not fit in very well. I spent all my adult life being surrounded by this team of people that I could rely on, right? And then all of a sudden, all of them except for my family, they're gone. And I really didn't know where to reach or go. I mean, the Army has a great transition program, and it went great. And I have nothing but good things to say about it. But it ended, and then I was by myself. So I took a job at Amazon as an area manager, which is kind of like being a platoon leader again. I did that for about 6 months, so I'm about halfway through that. And I was walking like 12 miles a day. I wasn't used to that. And Amazon is a really good company, and they take that, I think that box is going to be on your front step by this time. They're serious about that. And they have their whole thing laid out that where that box has to be every step of the way. They call it CPTs, or critical pull times, and this has to make. And I was in charge of the pack and the ship. So the guys who put the stuff in the box and the guys who put it on the truck, and it had to be there, right? And everything was timed off that. If you missed one, you had to do a lot of analysts. Well, I missed more than one. I missed 15. And when I looked around as to what happened, oh, it was clear as day what happened. I screwed up. Not my team, not anybody above me. It was all on Hilton. So I came for the military. You fail a mission. I mean, what is that, right? And people are, you know, wow, we haven't missed 15 in a long time. So I'm feeling pretty demoralized. I'm standing by the box of boxes. As you imagine, there are a lot of boxes at Amazon, right? And so we had a guy who, his job was to move boxes around on pallets so that we could keep the packers rolling. And everyone said, hey, he was a retired staff sergeant from the 82nd Airborne. And they're like, hey, Brad, stay away from that guy. He's kind of scary. He's grumpy. Okay, and one day he came up to me and he said, hey, Colonel. I don't know how he knew I was a colonel, but he did. He said, hey, Colonel, you ain't a colonel no more. This is Amazon. So I know you're you're used to getting whatever you want whenever you want it, but that's not the way it works here. So I'll give you these boxes next time, but you need to ask the right way. Here's the form, right? Okay, all right. He didn't really seem all that scary to me. He just sounded like he was an NCO from the 82nd, a non-commissioned officer from the 82nd Airborne. I kind of liked him, right? It made me feel like, hey, I like this guy. He reminds me of people that I know. So anyway, I'm in the middle of this moment, and I'm devastated, right? And I'm standing over by these boxes by myself, and he comes zinging by on his forklift, and he stops. And he says, I heard you screwed up today. Yeah, really bad. He said, are you having a bad day? I said, I'm having a really bad day. He said, no, you're not. I said, what do you mean? I just broke like the record of the fulfillment center on misses. And he said, did anybody shoot at you today? No, no one shot at me. Is everybody here going home today? Everybody's going home today. He said, Colonel, you didn't have a bad day. And he looked, and he started to drive away, and he stopped, and he said, don't you be a 32. If you are, you come see me. And that was the suicide rate of veterans at that time. If you can't tell, I get a little choked up over this. I was floored. I mean, I actually almost started crying in the middle of Amazon. The fact that he stopped at that moment to help me meant more to me than anything else in the world. And it was like a turning point in my transition. And I realized that day that my rank, whatever it was, is now veteran. And if you're a veteran, I am connected to you. I care. Because that guy stopped and did that for me. And then I started to learn that that community of veterans is out there, and I slowly started to find them. And they're here. We have several here tonight. We have F.I.S.H, what you do. Thank you for what you do. We have the American Legion. Thank you for what you're doing. And for all those, I know there's a lot of civilian. You guys can help too. It just doesn't have to be veterans. There's a lot of ways to do service.